Picture this. You come home from buying welding supplies, pull into your driveway, and find a pearl white Escalade parked inside your private workshop. Not in your driveway. Inside your actual workspace, blocking your tools, scratching your workbench, and shoving aside the vintage motorcycle you've been restoring for 3 years. The smell of expensive perfume mixing with motor oil hit me like a slap in the face. I could hear metal scraping against concrete where she'd forced my workshop door wider to squeeze her oversized SUV inside. This wasn't just parking where she shouldn't. This woman had literally broken into my sacred space and parked there like she owned the place. This woman had been making my life hell for months, but this crossed every line imaginable. What would you do if someone broke into your workspace and parked there like they owned it? Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and whether your HOA is run by tyrants too. Let me back up and tell you how this war started. My name's Dutch Kellerman. Yeah, my parents had a sense of humor. And I'm a 52-year-old retired machinist who bought into Pinewood Hills subdivision for one reason: that corner lot with the oversized workshop. Not the granite countertops or walk-in closets. The 30-40 garage where I could finally build custom motorcycles without landlords, neighbors, or city inspectors crawling up my backside. When I moved in, the subdivision smelled like possibility: fresh concrete, desert sage, and freedom. Half the lots were empty, construction crews hammering away, no HOA in sight. Just me, my Snap-on toolbox, and enough space to make some noise. 8 months later, the devil moved in wearing designer heels. Vivian Ashworth Chen arrived like a conquering queen, that pearl-white Escalade gleaming in the Arizona sun. Real estate agent, naturally. The type who could smell money from 3 zip codes away and treated every conversation like a hostile takeover. Within 6 weeks, she'd sweet-talked enough neighbors into forming an HOA and, shock of all shocks, crowned herself president. Her campaign slogan? Protecting property values through community standards. What she meant: I'm about to make your life a living hell while I play neighborhood dictator. The harassment started with my aesthetics violation. Still, picture this. I'm rebuilding a 1979 Sportster engine, parts carefully organized on my workbench, visible through the workshop windows. Clean, methodical, beautiful mechanical precision. But Princess Vivian decided my industrial debris was somehow destroying the neighborhood's residential character. Her first citation hit like a sledgehammer. Install $3,000 worth of privacy screening or pay $50 daily fines. $50 every single day for having motorcycle parts visible in my own damn workshop. Here's what she didn't count on. I actually read legal documents. My workshop predated the HOA by 14 months, making it grandfathered for any pre-existing structures and uses. Try explaining property law to someone whose legal education came from a laminated clipboard and an attitude problem. The violations multiplied like cancer. Paint color, too industrial. Standard garage gray that half of America uses. Driveway stains from normal maintenance. Excessive noise violations when I fired up tools during permitted hours. Each citation arrived on her expensive real estate letterhead, that thick watermarked paper that probably cost more per sheet than most people's coffee. But here's the really sick part. Vivian wasn't targeting everyone. The retired couples in their matching beige houses? Untouchable. The corporate lawyer with his boat parked permanently beside his garage? Golden boy. Just us blue-collar guys got the treatment. Marco, my plumber buddy across the street, got cited for parking his work van in his own driveway. The electrician on Oak Street faced daily fines for commercial vehicle storage. But when the real estate developer's spoiled son parked his monster truck with tires bigger than garbage cans, crickets. The neighborhood started reeking of fear instead of desert flowers. Neighbors who used to wave began studying their shoes when Vivian's heels clicked across asphalt during her evening compliance inspections. Conversations died mid-sentence when her shadow fell across driveways. Most people figured it was easier to kiss the ring than fight the queen. Keep your head down, follow the rules. Maybe the hurricane passes you by. But I had allies. Marco, who told Vivian exactly where she could stick her van citation, and Beth, a tough-as-nails 73-year-old widow whose late husband had been a master mechanic. Beth understood that a man's workshop is sacred territory. 3 months of this psychological warfare and I was questioning everything. Maybe small-town tyranny always wins. Maybe fighting petty dictators was a sucker's game. Then Tuesday morning arrived like divine intervention. I'd spent the morning at Harbor Freight buying a new welding helmet and steel rod for a custom exhaust project. Drove home humming along to classic rock, tools rattling in the truck bed, planning my afternoon in mechanical paradise. Pulled into my driveway, grabbed my gear, and walked toward my sanctuary. That's when I found her Escalade parked where my workbench belonged. The gloves were officially off. I stood there for 30 seconds, just staring at that Escalade crammed into my sacred space like some kind of automotive obscenity. The engine was still ticking as it cooled down, and I could smell hot metal mixing with her expensive leather interior. She'd literally just finished parking in my workshop and walked away like she owned the place. A note fluttered under her windshield wiper. Expensive paper, naturally. Emergency parking due to street cleaning, VA. Emergency? The only emergency was about to be the one I created for her entitled ass. I marched straight to her house, 2 streets over in the biggest model home the builder offered, and found her hosting what looked like a real estate power meeting. 4 women in matching athleisure outfits, all clutching coffee cups that probably cost more than my lunch, all nodding along as Vivian gestured with manicured talons. "Excuse me," I said, stepping onto her precious travertine porch. "Get your car out of my workshop, now." Vivian didn't even look up from her presentation board. "Dutch, we're in the middle of important community business. Can't this wait?" "Lady, your SUV is parked where my workbench lives." "No, it can't wait." That got her attention. She set down her coffee with theatrical precision and turned to face me like I was a particularly annoying cockroach. "Oh, that. Yes, I left you a note explaining the emergency access situation." "Emergency access? What emergency?" She produced a laminated sheet from her purse, because of course she had official-looking documents ready to go. "Any HOA officer may utilize private property for community safety purposes. It's right here in the covenants." The smell of expensive coffee and fresh pastries couldn't mask the stench of pure bullshit wafting from her mouth. Her coffee club cronies shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension but too scared to speak up. "Show me where that's written," I demanded. "I don't have to justify emergency protocol to you, Dutch. Your aggressive tone is exactly why we need these safety measures." She turned to her audience. "This is precisely the attitude that destroys property values." Here's where I made my first tactical mistake. I lost my cool. My voice went up, my hands started moving, and suddenly I looked like the crazy neighbor having a meltdown on someone's porch. Years ago, my ex-wife used to tell me that anger makes you stupid, and right then I proved her point. "Aggressive? You broke into my property." "I feel unsafe with this hostile behavior," Vivian announced to her witnesses. Patricia, one of the older board members, actually nodded. "Maybe we should call the police." That's when my brain kicked back into gear. I remembered something my old foreman used to say. When someone's lying, let them talk. Liars always hang themselves if you give them enough rope. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recording app. Arizona's a one-party consent state, something I'd learned during my divorce, which means I can record any conversation I'm part of without telling the other person. "So you're stating for the record that HOA officers can break into private property without permission?" Vivian's eyes lit up with confidence. She thought she was winning. "That's exactly what the emergency access clause authorizes, yes." "And you're comfortable with that policy?" "Absolutely. Community safety trumps individual convenience every time." Beautiful, pure, documented arrogance flowing like honey into my phone's memory. "Great. Can I get a copy of this emergency access clause you're referencing?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. Her acrylic nails started tapping against her granite countertop. Click, click, click like a nervous woodpecker sensing danger. "I'll email it to you when I have time." "When might that be?" "When I'm not dealing with hostile neighbors disrupting community meetings." The truth hit me like a wrench to the skull. She couldn't produce the document because it didn't exist. But instead of calling her out and giving her time to prepare a defense, I decided to let her dig the hole deeper. Sometimes the best strategy is letting your enemy think they're winning. "Fair enough. I'll wait for that email. Thanks for clarifying HOA policy." I walked away, leaving her looking triumphant and her coffee club looking confused. Patricia whispered something about, maybe we should review the actual documents, but Vivian shut that down fast with talk about supporting community leadership. Here's what I noticed on my way out. Fresh scrapes on her Escalade's driver's side door and a dent in the rear quarter panel. Someone had been having parking problems lately, and my workshop had just become her personal solution. Back home, I found Marco peeking through his living room blinds. He came outside as I approached my driveway, the sound of his work boots crunching on gravel announcing his approach. "Dude, what the hell is her car doing in your shop?" "Emergency access, apparently." "Emergency access to what? Your socket wrench collection?" That got me laughing despite the rage burning in my chest. Marco had a way of cutting through bullshit with blue-collar common sense. "She's claiming some clause in the HOA docs gives her the right." "Bullshit. My brother-in-law's a paralegal. He looked over our covenants when we bought. There's nothing like that in there." 20 minutes later, Beth shuffled over from her corner house, moving faster than I'd seen her move in months. The afternoon sun caught the silver in her hair as she approached, determination written across her weathered face. "Dutch, honey, I saw the whole thing. That woman parked in your garage?" "Workshop, but yeah." She tried the same garbage with the Johnsons before they moved. Kept finding excuses to access their backyard, claiming HOA inspection rights that didn't exist. Same pattern every time. 8 families, in 18 months. That wasn't incompetence, that was strategy. That evening, I spread every HOA document across my kitchen table like a battle plan. Coffee going cold, reading glasses perched on my nose. I went through those covenants line by line. 3 hours later, my suspicions were confirmed. No emergency access clause existed anywhere in the original documents. But Vivian wasn't done playing games. The next morning, my email dinged with a message from her official HOA account. Subject line, Emergency Access Protocol Documentation. Attached was a PDF titled, Community Safety Provisions, Original Covenant Amendment. I opened it and almost choked on my coffee. There it was in black and white. HOA officers may access private property during community emergencies or safety concerns. Dated exactly 18 months ago, the same date as our original covenants. Something stank worse than week-old motor oil. Back in my machinist days, we dealt with quality control documents that had to be bulletproof. I learned that every digital file carries invisible fingerprints called metadata, creation dates, modification history, even which computer program made it. Call it paranoia, but I right-clicked on Vivian's PDF and checked the properties. Creation date, yesterday, 11:47 p.m. Program used, Microsoft Word 2019. The lying bitch had forged the document 12 hours ago and tried to pass it off as original HOA covenant language. Now I had a choice. Confront her immediately or let her hang herself with more rope. My old foreman's wisdom echoed in my head. Smart fighters pick their battlefield. I decided to go nuclear and forward her email to the entire HOA mailing list with a simple message. Can everyone please verify this clause appears in your original covenant documents? Want to make sure we're all working from the same paperwork. Within 2 hours, my phone started buzzing. 3 neighbors couldn't find the clause. Marco's brother-in-law, Rick, the paralegal, called me directly. Dutch, this document is faker than a $3 bill. The formatting doesn't match, the legal language is wrong, and that metadata screams forgery. What's our next move? Let her keep digging. Document fraud is a felony in Arizona, especially when it involves property rights. Every lie she tells now makes the eventual case stronger. But Vivian wasn't going down without a fight. She called an emergency board meeting that afternoon, sending frantic emails about community discord and hostile behavior patterns. The meeting agenda had one item: addressing Dutch Kellerman's harassment of HOA leadership. I showed up with a 3-ring binder full of printed emails, screenshots, and my phone with that recorded conversation queued up. The community center smelled like nervous sweat and cheap coffee, fluorescent lights humming overhead as 15 residents filed in looking uncomfortable. This emergency meeting concerns escalating harassment, Vivian announced, her voice dripping with fake authority. Dutch Kellerman has been spreading lies about official HOA documentation and creating division in our community. What lies? I asked calmly. Questioning legitimate emergency access protocols, encouraging neighbors to doubt official procedures. You mean asking people to verify a document that didn't exist until you created it yesterday? Her face flushed red. That's exactly the kind of conspiracy thinking that... Hold up, I pulled out my phone. Before this goes any further, I think everyone should hear something. I played the recording from her porch. Her own voice filled the room. That's exactly what the emergency access clause authorizes, yes. Then my voice asking for a copy, and her promising to email it when she had time. Silence. You could hear the air conditioning cycling on. Patricia, The board member who'd been nodding along yesterday spoke up. Vivian, I've been on this board since formation. I don't remember any emergency access clause. It's clearly documented. In a file created yesterday, I interrupted, pulling out printed screenshots of the metadata. Created at 11:47 p.m. on your computer, 12 hours before you emailed it, claiming it was original covenant language. Harold, another board member, adjusted his glasses and studied the printouts. This says the document was made in Microsoft Word yesterday. How is that possible if it's from 18 months ago? Vivian's confidence cracked like cheap paint. There must be some technical error in the digital conversion process. Or you forged it, Marco called out from the back row. The room erupted in whispers. 3 more neighbors admitted they couldn't find any emergency access language in their original documents. Rick stood up and identified himself as a paralegal, explaining that document fraud carries serious legal consequences. That's when Vivian made her second critical mistake. Instead of backing down, she doubled down. I don't have to justify HOA authority to people who refuse to respect community standards, she snapped. If you don't like our policies, you're free to move elsewhere. The threat hung in the air like toxic fumes. She'd just told a room full of homeowners to get out if they didn't submit to her authority. Patricia stood up. I think we need to table this discussion until the board can review all documentation with legal counsel. The board doesn't need legal counsel to enforce existing covenants, Vivian shot back. Apparently we do, Harold muttered, since half of them seem to be made up. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, I noticed Vivian frantically texting someone. Her hands were shaking as she typed, sweat beading on her forehead despite the air conditioning. The war was just beginning, but I was no longer fighting alone. Word traveled fast through Pinewood Hills after that board meeting disaster. By Thursday, Beth had organized what she called a coffee club, but was really an underground resistance movement. 12 neighbors showed up to her living room, and the stories that came out would have made a mob lawyer blush. The Hendersons, forced out after Vivian claimed their vegetable garden violated landscaping standards. The Garcias, harassed over their work trailer until they sold and moved to Tucson. 8 families total, all good people, all driven away by systematic psychological warfare. Rick, Marco's paralegal brother-in-law, laid out the legal reality for us. She's violated about 6 different Arizona statutes already. Document fraud, harassment, abuse of authority. But here's the thing. We need more evidence before any prosecutor will touch this. How much more? Beth asked, her voice sharp with decades of experience dealing with bullies. Enough to show clear intent and pattern. Right now she can claim mistakes, misunderstandings, clerical errors. We need her to do something so blatantly illegal that there's no wiggle room. I didn't have to wait long. That weekend I took my annual camping trip to Sedona. 3 days of hiking, fishing, and pretending the world didn't exist. My phone stayed in the truck, my tools stayed locked up, and my workshop security system kept its electronic eyes on everything. Monday morning I came home to find my workshop lock super glued shut. Not just a little dab. Someone had squeezed an entire tube of industrial adhesive into the mechanism, then smeared more around the door frame for good measure. The stuff had dried harder than concrete, and the chemical smell still lingered in the desert air. Here's where that security system investment paid off. My cameras caught everything in beautiful, high-definition color. Saturday night, 2:17 a.m. A figure in dark clothing approaches my workshop. Face obscured by a hoodie, but the walk was unmistakable. That distinctive hip-swaying stride I'd watched click across driveways in designer heels. Better yet, the motion-activated spotlight caught a flash of turquoise jewelry on her wrist. Vivian's signature bracelet, the one she wore to every HOA meeting like some kind of royal crown jewel. But when I enhanced the footage and studied the timestamps, something didn't add up. According to her Facebook posts, Vivian was at a real estate conference in Phoenix that weekend. Photos of her at the hotel, the conference room, even a selfie by the pool, all posted Sunday night with geotags showing the Phoenician resort. That's when I remembered something else from my quality control days. Digital photos carry more metadata than just creation dates. They also record GPS coordinates and original photo times, which can be different from posting times. A quick metadata check revealed the truth. All her weekend conference photos were actually taken Friday afternoon before I left for camping. She'd staged an entire fake alibi, complete with social media evidence, then driven back to Sedona for her midnight vandalism spree. Rick nearly fell off Beth's couch when I showed him the evidence. Holy shit, Dutch. She's not just harassing you, she's committing premeditated crimes with forethought and planning. That's felony territory. But Vivian was just getting started. Tuesday. Marco got cited for parking his plumber's van in his own driveway. Commercial vehicle storage violation, complete with photos taken from multiple angles and a demand for $500 in immediate fines. Wednesday. Beth received a violation notice for excessive garden decorations. The offense? A small memorial garden for her late husband with angel statues and American flag. Vivian claimed it violated religious display restrictions that didn't exist in any HOA document. Thursday. My own mailbox was stuffed with 3 new citations. Noise violations for excessive power tool usage during permitted hours. Environmental hazard claims for automotive fluid storage because I kept motor oil in approved containers. Even a structural modification violation because my security cameras were altering the exterior appearance of my property. Each citation came with escalating fines and threats of legal action. The paperwork smelled like desperation and expensive perfume. That's when the pattern became crystal clear. Vivian wasn't just targeting me anymore. She was going after anyone who'd supported me at the board meeting. Psychological warfare designed to isolate me from my allies and send a message to the rest of the neighborhood. Cross the queen bee and face the consequences. But she made one critical mistake. She underestimated Beth. Friday evening, I was installing additional security lights around my workshop when Beth shuffled over with something that made my blood run cold. A manila envelope thick with papers. "Honey, I've been doing some research on our dear HOA president," she said, settling onto my porch steps with a grunt. "Did you know Vivian owes $89,000 on credit cards? How did you find that out?" "Public records, sweetie. Divorce filings, bankruptcy warnings, liens. Her real estate business is failing faster than a house of cards in a windstorm. Want to guess what her only source of income has been for the past 18 months? She handed me a printout of property sales records. 8 houses, all former neighbors who'd been harassed into selling, all listed by Vivian's agency. Average commission per house, $18,000. Total profit from her harassment campaign, $144,000. Suddenly everything made sense. This wasn't about property values or community standards. This was about money. Cold, hard cash from forcing families to flee their own homes. The gloves weren't just off, they'd been incinerated. Staring at those property records in Beth's wrinkled hands, I felt like someone had just explained how a magic trick works. Suddenly obvious, but you feel stupid for not seeing it earlier. Beth's research had uncovered the ugly truth behind Vivian's reign of terror. "Look at the timing," Beth said, spreading the papers across my porch like a detective laying out evidence. Her arthritic finger traced the pattern. Every single family got harassed for exactly 30 to 45 days before they listed their homes. And guess who always had pre-qualified buyers ready to make immediate offers? The documentation was damning. The Hendersons, harassed about their garden, sold after 6 weeks. Vivian collected an $18,000 commission. The Garcias, tormented over their work trailer, gone in 5 weeks, another 18 grand in Vivian's pocket. 8 families total, each one following the identical playbook. But here's the part that made my blood boil. My corner lot was worth significantly more than the others. The oversized workshop, the premium location, the extra square footage. Conservative estimate, $75,000 above base price. If Vivian could force me out, she stood to make a $22,500 commission on the flip. Rick confirmed what we all suspected when he ran deeper public record searches. "She's not just targeting random people," he explained over Beth's kitchen table that evening, surrounded by legal documents and printouts. "Every house she's harassed and flipped has been sold to the same buyer, a shell company called Desert Vista Holdings." "Let me guess," I said. "Connected to Vivian somehow?" "The registered agent is her brother Dennis, the same guy who's been helping with her late-night workshop visits. The conspiracy ran deeper than simple harassment. This was organized real estate fraud, using HOA authority as a weapon to artificially manipulate the housing market. In Arizona, real estate agents have a legal duty to disclose conflicts of interest and avoid creating artificial market pressures. What Vivian was doing violated about 12 different professional ethics rules and probably federal mail fraud laws. "There's more," Rick continued, pulling out another folder. "I found insurance claims connected to 3 of the houses. Vivian helped the previous owners file damage claims for harassment-related losses after they moved, split the insurance payouts with them under the table. Insurance fraud on top of everything else. This woman had turned neighborhood terrorism into a full-scale criminal enterprise. But the most revealing discovery came from Beth's social media detective work. Turns out Vivian had been bragging to her real estate circle about her innovative market strategies and creative problem-solving in challenging neighborhoods. Screenshots from private Facebook groups showed her offering advice to other agents about maximizing turnover opportunities in HOA communities. She'd literally written a playbook for using Homeowner Association authority to commit real estate fraud. The financial pressure was obvious once you knew where to look. Vivian owed $89,000 on credit cards, faced foreclosure on her own mortgage, and her legitimate real estate business was dying in a competitive market. These forced sales weren't just supplemental income. They were her financial lifeline. "So, what's our play?" Marco asked, cracking his knuckles like he was ready to start throwing punches. Rick leaned back in his chair, a prosecutor's gleam in his eyes. "We let her think she's winning. Dutch acts defeated, maybe mentions he's considering moving. She'll get overconfident and make bigger mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "The kind that carry federal charges, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, real estate license violations. Right now we have her on harassment and document forgery, but if we can get her to actively try manipulating you into selling with her own financial interest involved, that's felony territory with serious prison time." Beth poured more coffee, the evening desert air carrying the scent of sage through her open windows. "So we set a trap." "Exactly. Make her think victory's within reach, then document her trying to close the deal through fraud and coercion." The bait was simple. Let word slip that all this harassment was wearing me down, that maybe it was time to find somewhere quieter. Give Vivian enough rope to hang herself with, then watch her tie the noose. Sometimes the best revenge is just giving your enemies exactly what they want and recording every second of their downfall. Sunday evening, Beth's living room transformed into our war room. The coffee table disappeared under legal documents, property records, and printed screenshots. Marco brought pizza and his brother-in-law Rick, armed with a laptop full of Arizona real estate law. I contributed a cooler of beer and 3 ring binders of evidence that could probably convict half the neighborhood if we wanted. The smell of pepperoni mixed with Beth's lavender air freshener as we planned Vivian's downfall like generals preparing for D-Day. "First things first," Rick said, spreading Arizona revised statutes across Beth's flowered couch. "We file complaints with every relevant agency: Real Estate Board, County Attorney's Office, HOA Ombudsman. Creates an official paper trail that prosecutors love to see." Beth pulled out a yellow legal pad, her handwriting still perfect despite arthritis. "I'll coordinate community outreach. Every neighbor who's been harassed needs to document everything. Dates, times, financial losses, emotional distress." "What about the 8 families who already moved?" Marco asked around a mouthful of pizza. "Already on it," I said, pulling out my phone. "Tracked down 6 of them through social media. The Hendersons are willing to testify. Said they'd been waiting for someone to finally take her down." Rick nodded approvingly. "Pattern evidence is golden in fraud cases. Shows intent, planning, and systematic criminal behavior rather than isolated incidents." Here's what I'd learned from 30 years in precision manufacturing. Successful operations require clear roles, solid communication, and redundant systems. Everyone needed a specific job based on their skills and connections. Marco took community organizing. His plumbing route covered half the subdivision, giving him natural access to gather intelligence and recruit allies. Plus, working-class guys trusted other working-class guys, credibility Vivian couldn't buy with all her fancy letterhead. Beth became our intelligence coordinator. Turns out sweet little old ladies can ask questions that would seem suspicious coming from anyone else. She'd already discovered Vivian's credit card debt, her failing business, and her brother Dennis's criminal record for construction fraud in California. Rick handled legal strategy. His paralegal firm specialized in property disputes, and his boss was excited about the precedent potential. Pro bono representation in exchange for the right to publish the case study. Win-win for everyone except Vivian. My job was technical documentation. Every security camera angle optimized, backup systems in place, cloud storage with multiple access points. If Vivian so much as looked at my property wrong, we'd have it recorded in high definition with timestamps and GPS coordinates. "The sting operation needs perfect timing," Rick explained, pulling up Arizona criminal statutes on his laptop. "We want her to commit multiple felonies in sequence, breaking and entering, theft, fraud, maybe even extortion if we can get her to threaten you directly." How do we guarantee she takes the bait? Make yourself appear defeated but not broken. Mention you're considering offers but don't seem eager. She needs to think she's finally wearing you down, not that you're giving up completely. Beth's church network provided unexpected resources. 3 retired teachers offered to help with document organization. A former bank manager volunteered financial analysis services. Even the pastor agreed to let us use the church basement for larger meetings if needed. Marco's contractor connections supplied surveillance equipment at cost. Motion sensors, night vision cameras, audio recording devices, enough technology to make the FBI jealous. His electrician buddy, Jim, rewired my entire workshop with hidden power supplies that couldn't be easily detected or disabled. The communication strategy was military-grade paranoid. Encrypted messaging apps for coordination, code words for different types of incidents, emergency contact trees if the situation escalated beyond simple harassment. Rick insisted on treating this like organized crime investigation because that's essentially what it was. Remember, he warned as we wrapped up the planning session, once we start this, there's no backing down. Vivian's looking at serious federal charges when this is over. Desperate people do desperate things. Good, I said. The anger I'd been suppressing for months finally finding productive focus. I want her desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. Our timeline was aggressive but realistic. 2 weeks to gather additional evidence and coordinate with authorities. Then I'd start acting defeated, mentioning the stress, talking about maybe needing a change of scenery, letting slip that I'd been looking at properties in other states. The beauty of the plan was its simplicity. We weren't entrapping Vivian or forcing her to commit crimes. We were just giving her the opportunity to be herself. A lying, fraudulent, predatory piece of garbage who couldn't resist kicking someone when they appeared to be down. Beth walked me to my truck after the meeting, her hand surprisingly strong on my arm. You know, honey, I haven't felt this alive in years. Harold would have loved watching us take down a bully. Think we can pull it off? Dutch, that woman picked a fight with the wrong neighborhood. She's about to learn what happens when you mess with people who actually work for a living. The desert night air carried the scent of possibility and impending justice. 3 weeks from now, Vivian Ashworth Chen would either be in handcuffs or fleeing Arizona with her tail between her legs. Either outcome worked fine for me. Acting defeated turned out to be easier than I expected. After months of harassment, half the exhaustion was real anyway. Tuesday morning, I made a show of standing in my driveway, staring at my workshop with slumped shoulders and shaking my head like a man who'd finally hit his breaking point. "Everything okay, Dutch?" Marco called from across the street, playing his part perfectly. "Just tired, man. Really tired." I let my voice carry the weight of genuine frustration. Thinking maybe it's time to find somewhere quieter. Maybe Colorado, where people mind their own damn business. Within 6 hours, Beth reported that Vivian had been seen speed walking through the neighborhood, practically vibrating with excitement. The hook was set. Thursday, I cranked up the performance. Loaded camping gear into my truck with exaggerated weariness, telling anyone who'd listen about my 2-week escape to the mountains. How I needed to get away from all this stress and think about what comes next. Vivian materialized like a vulture sensing roadkill, clicking across my driveway in her designer heels. "Heading out of town, Dutch?" "Yeah, camping in Colorado. Need some space to clear my head." That sounds refreshing. Sometimes a change of perspective helps us see solutions we missed before. The predatory gleam in her eyes could have powered the whole subdivision. She was already calculating commission checks. Friday morning, I loaded the truck with enough gear to convince the neighbors I'd be gone for weeks. In reality, I drove exactly 37 minutes to a cabin rental outside Sedona, complete with high-speed internet and perfect cell service for monitoring my security system remotely. The wait didn't last long. 6 hours after my departure, Vivian was photographing my property from the street. My cameras caught her testing the workshop doors, checking windows, even measuring the driveway with a cloth tape measure. She spent 20 minutes on her phone, gesturing at my house like she was already showing it to buyers. Day 2 brought the first probe. Vivian arrived with 2 people in expensive suits, introducing them to my neighbors as potential buyers interested in the area. The audio from my hidden microphones was crystal clear. This property has so much potential once the current owner relocates. The workshop space alone could support a home business or 3-car garage conversion. She was already selling my house while I supposedly considered leaving. Day 3 escalated beautifully. Vivian returned with a locksmith claiming she needed access for an HOA emergency inspection. Professional-grade cameras captured the entire conversation as the locksmith, a guy named Tony who clearly knew his business, refused when she couldn't produce proper authorization. That's when desperation kicked in. Vivian pulled out her wallet and counted out $200 in cash. "Look, I just need you to confirm there are no safety hazards inside. 5 minutes, in and out." Tony pocketed the money, but made her sign a liability waiver first. Smart guy. The footage of Vivian bribing a contractor to break into my property was worth its weight in federal indictments. But day 4 was when she truly lost her mind. 2:17 a.m., motion sensors triggered across my entire property. 2 figures approached through the desert behind my workshop, Vivian and a heavy-set guy I later identified as her brother Dennis. They'd parked somewhere out of sight and hiked through the scrub brush, probably thinking the cover of darkness made them invisible. Wrong. My night vision cameras turned their criminal spree into an IMAX production. 43 minutes inside my workshop. 43 minutes of them photographing every tool, every piece of equipment, every project. Audio picked up their entire conversation, Vivian explaining which machinery would bring the highest resale value, Dennis taking notes on how to transport the expensive items without damage. "Once we get him out, this equipment alone is worth 30 grand, Vivian whispered, running her hands over my mill like she was caressing stolen treasure. "The buyers already agreed to purchase everything as is. Just make sure the harassment looks legitimate," Dennis replied, his voice gravelly from years of cigarettes. "We can't have this traced back to us." Too late, genius. Every word was being recorded in high-definition digital clarity and automatically uploaded to 3 different cloud servers. Day 5 brought property damage. Vivian returned alone, spending an hour systematically sabotaging my 1947 Harley restoration. Sand in the gas tank, deep scratches across the custom paint job I'd spent months perfecting, loosened bolts on critical components. $8,000 in damage, all captured in beautiful Technicolor detail. Meanwhile, her social media maintained the fiction of being in Phoenix. Conference photos, hotel selfies, restaurant check-ins, all posted with fake timestamps but created days earlier. The metadata told the real story of her elaborate alibi construction. By day 7, she'd escalated to insurance fraud, filed a claim with the HOA insurance company for environmental hazard remediation at my property, requesting $15,000 to professionally clean contamination before resale. The claim cited imaginary oil spills and chemical storage violations that existed nowhere except her criminal imagination. My phone buzzed constantly with updates from the security system. Each notification brought fresh evidence of felony crimes. Each video clip, another nail in Vivian's legal coffin. Rick was monitoring everything from his office, building a federal case that would make prosecutors weep with joy. "She's not just committing crimes," he texted. "She's documenting them for us." The trap was working perfectly. Day 10, Vivian crossed the line from criminal to completely unhinged. I watched through my phone screen as she changed the locks on my workshop. Not just adding a padlock, she had Dennis remove my original hardware and install her own deadbolt system. Then she posted a hand-lettered "No Trespassing" HOA property under investigation sign like she'd claimed my building through eminent domain. The sheer audacity took my breath away. This woman had convinced herself that saying something made it true, that authority came from acting like you had it. She was living in a fantasy world where HOA presidents could seize private property through sheer force of will. But reality was about to come knocking with handcuffs and felony charges. Day 11, I packed up my camping gear and drove home. Rick and Marco met me at a gas station 2 miles from the subdivision, both wearing expressions somewhere between excitement and disbelief. 47 hours of footage, Rick announced, scrolling through his tablet. 23 separate criminal acts, 8 witnesses, and enough evidence to convict her of crimes we haven't even thought of yet. "The neighbors are pissed," Marco added. "Mrs. Patterson saw them loading your tools into Dennis's truck yesterday. She called the cops, but Vivian claimed she had authorization from the city." We drove to my house in convoy formation, Rick's sedan, Marco's work truck, and my camping rig. The plan was simple: approach my own front door, call police when I discovered the break-in, and let Vivian hang herself with her own lies. She must have been watching from somewhere because her Escalade appeared in my driveway within minutes of our arrival. Like a moth drawn to flame, she couldn't resist the opportunity to gloat over her apparent victory. Officer Rodriguez, the same cop who dealt with our previous complaints, arrived with backup, sensing this call might be more complex than a simple breaking and entering report. The mid-afternoon sun beat down on us as neighbors emerged from air-conditioned houses, drawn by the magnetic pull of unfolding drama. "What seems to be the problem?" Rodriguez asked, pen already moving across his notepad. "Someone broke into my workshop and changed the locks," I explained, pointing at the unfamiliar hardware gleaming on my door. "Also stole about $15,000 worth of tools and equipment." "That's not theft," Vivian interrupted, clicking across my driveway like she owned it. "The HOA secured this property for safety violations while the owner was absent. All removed items are being held pending environmental remediation." Rodriguez looked from me to Vivian to the obviously new locks. "Ma'am, do you have authorization to access this gentleman's private property?" "I'm the HOA president. I have emergency authority for community safety issues." "I'd like to see that authorization, please." That's when I pulled out my phone and queued up the security footage. "Officer, before she shows you anything, I think you should see what really happened while I was camping." The screen lit up with night vision footage of Vivian and Dennis breaking in through my rear window. Rodriguez watched in growing amazement as they rifled through my personal papers, photographed my equipment, and discussed which tools would bring the highest resale value. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said slowly, "are you aware that everything you do on someone else's property can be legally recorded?" Vivian's face cycled through confusion, anger, and dawning panic like a broken traffic light. "Those cameras are illegal. They're recording HOA common areas without authorization." "This is his private property," Rodriguez replied. "He can record whatever he wants here." The crowd of neighbors had grown to 15 people, forming a semicircle around our increasingly dramatic confrontation. I recognized faces from our resistance meetings mixed with neutral residents who'd stayed silent during months of harassment. "Furthermore," I continued, "I have recordings of you bribing contractors to break in, forging HOA documents, filing fraudulent insurance claims, and committing about 12 other felonies over the past week." Vivian's lawyer training kicked in, or maybe just pure desperation. "This is entrapment! He set me up by pretending to leave town." "Ma'am," Rodriguez said patiently, "entrapment is when police force someone to commit crimes they wouldn't normally commit. Recording ongoing criminal activity isn't illegal." That's when she completely lost it. Vivian lunged for my phone, screaming about conspiracy and invasion of privacy. When I pulled it away, she grabbed for it again, and this time sent it flying onto the concrete driveway, the screen shattered like her last vestige of sanity. "Destruction of evidence," Rodriguez announced, producing handcuffs with practiced efficiency. "That's another felony, ma'am." The click of metal around Vivian's wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. Dennis, apparently realizing he was next, made a run for his truck, but found Marco blocking the way with 200 pounds of righteous plumber fury. As Rodriguez read Vivian her rights, the neighborhood erupted in conversations that had been bottled up for 18 months. Patricia demanded an emergency board meeting. Harold called for a complete audit of Vivian's actions. 3 neighbors apologized for not speaking up sooner. The revolution had begun, and our tyrant queen was riding to jail in the back of a squad car. Thursday evening, 7 p.m. sharp, the Pinewood Hills Community Center buzzed with an energy I'd never felt in our sleepy subdivision. 89 residents packed into a room designed for 40, folding chairs squeezed between potted plants, the smell of nervous anticipation mixing with industrial-strength coffee and Beth's homemade cookies. Local Channel 12 had set up cameras after the story went viral on neighborhood social media. HOA president arrested for home invasion was apparently the kind of feel-good justice porn that made perfect evening news content. I walked in with my 3-ring binders of evidence, Rick carrying his laptop full of legal documents, and Marco grinning like he'd won the lottery. The room erupted in applause. Actual standing ovation from people who'd been too scared to speak up for months but were finally ready to reclaim their neighborhood. Vivian sat at the president's table like nothing had happened, flanked by an expensive attorney who looked like he charged more per hour than most people made in a week. Released on bail, she'd apparently convinced herself this was all a minor misunderstanding that would blow over once she explained herself properly. "Wrong again, princess." Patricia, serving as interim board chair, called the meeting to order with shaking hands. "Tonight's emergency session will address recent criminal charges against our president and determine appropriate next steps for community leadership." "Point of order," Vivian's lawyer interrupted. "My client maintains her innocence of all alleged charges and requests this proceeding be postponed until legal matters are resolved." "Overruled," Patricia shot back with surprising steel in her voice. This isn't a criminal trial, it's a community meeting to address documented misconduct. Rick connected his laptop to the projector, and suddenly Vivian's crimes played on the big screen in high-definition glory. The room gasped as they watched her break into my workshop, photograph my equipment, and discuss resale values like she was already dividing up stolen goods. "Those recordings are illegally obtained," her attorney protested. "Arizona is a one-party consent state," Rick replied calmly. "Everything you're seeing was recorded on my client's private property, which makes it completely admissible evidence." But the real knockout punch came when we played her own voice from that first confrontation on her porch. Community safety trumps individual convenience every time, followed immediately by footage of her bribing locksmiths and vandalizing my motorcycle. The attorney tried damage control. "These alleged incidents represent misunderstandings about HOA authority, not criminal intent." That's when Beth stood up, all 73 years of her radiating righteous fury. "Misunderstandings? This woman forced 8 families out of their homes and pocketed over $100,000 in commissions." She handed Patricia a folder thick with property records, sales data, and commission statements. Every family she harassed was forced to sell within 2 months. Every house was listed by her agency. Every sale made her richer while destroying our neighbors' lives. The room erupted in angry voices as people connected the dots. Vivian hadn't been protecting property values. She'd been manipulating them for personal profit, using HOA authority as a weapon to commit systematic real estate fraud. Harold stood up, adjusting his glasses with trembling hands. "I've been on this board since formation. I never authorized property seizures, emergency access, or any of the authority she claimed to have." "Because none of it exists," Patricia added, producing the original HOA documents. "She forged emergency clauses, fabricated inspection rights, and lied about board authorization for 18 months. That's when Channel 12's reporter stepped forward with her microphone. "Mr. Kellerman, what would you say to other homeowners facing similar HOA abuse?" I looked directly into the camera, feeling the weight of everyone who'd been bullied by petty tyrants in positions of imaginary authority. Document everything. Find allies. Never back down from bullies who think a clipboard makes them untouchable. But it was my next line that went viral. She thought she could weld shut my dreams, but she only welded shut her own fate the moment she entered my shop. The reporter turned to Vivian, who'd been growing increasingly agitated as her empire crumbled in real time. "Ms. Ashworth Chen, do you have any response to these allegations?" Vivian stood up, her chair scraping against linoleum like fingernails on a chalkboard. "You people don't deserve the property values I've protected. This ungrateful neighborhood would be a slum without my leadership." Even her own attorney tried to pull her back down, but she was beyond reason. "Dutch Kellerman is a bitter, vindictive man who's destroyed my reputation with his vendetta." "The only thing destroyed here," Marco called from the back, "is your criminal enterprise." The vote was swift and merciless. 87 votes to remove Vivian as president, 0 votes in opposition, 2 abstentions from people who'd apparently fallen asleep during the excitement. Patricia was elected interim president by acclamation, promising transparency, actual community building, and an end to the reign of terror that had masqueraded as neighborhood governance. As Vivian stormed out with her lawyer scrambling behind her, Officer Rodriguez announced that additional charges were being filed based on tonight's evidence. Federal prosecutors were interested in the mail fraud and conspiracy aspects. The community center erupted in celebration that felt like liberation. After 18 months of fear, Pinewood Hills was finally free. 6 months later, I'm standing in my workshop teaching Mrs. Patterson how to weld a broken garden gate while her 8-year-old grandson watches in fascination. The smell of hot metal and possibility fills the air where paranoia and fear used to live. Vivian pleaded guilty to 14 criminal charges rather than face a federal trial that would have sent her to prison for a decade. 18 months probation, $47,000 in restitution, 200 hours of community service, and permanent loss of her real estate license. Her house went into foreclosure within 60 days, and she disappeared from Arizona like a bad dream finally ending. Our monthly Pinewood Hills Fix-It Clinic has become the neighborhood's heartbeat. 34 residents have learned everything from basic welding to motorcycle maintenance, building friendships along with their projects. The sound of laughter mixing with power tools is music that drowns out any memory of clicking heels and hostile inspections. Marco's plumbing business exploded through neighborhood referrals. Turns out people love supporting someone who stands up to bullies. Beth transformed our resistance network into a community garden committee, creating a memorial space for her late husband that even the strictest HOA would be proud to showcase. The legal precedent we set became a blueprint for fighting HOA abuse across Arizona. Rick's law firm published Dutch versus the HOA Queen, a homeowner's guide to fighting neighborhood tyranny, which has helped dozens of families reclaim their properties from petty dictators. The key lesson echoed through every case: document everything, because justice loves evidence more than emotions. Our new HOA board eliminated 89% of Vivian's ridiculous violation categories, replacing punitive enforcement with actual community building. Property values increased 12% through genuine improvements rather than manufactured fear. Amazing what happens when people work together instead of against each other. The ripple effects spread beyond our subdivision. My story inspired similar resistance movements in 6 other Arizona communities. The state legislature is considering a homeowner bill of rights that would prevent future Vivians from weaponizing neighborhood associations for personal profit. But the sweetest victory came at our first annual Community Unity Festival. My completed 1947 Harley, fully restored after Vivian's sabotage, won Best in Show at the state motorcycle competition. I donated the prize money to create the Good Neighbor Scholarship, a $5,000 annual award for local high school students pursuing trade careers. Vivian's former house? The community bought it and converted the garage into a shared workshop space where neighbors can access professional-grade tools without the overhead of individual ownership. Beth suggested we put up a plaque, "In memory of tyranny defeated by ordinary people doing extraordinary things." The anniversary celebration drew over 200 people, including 3 families who'd moved back to Pinewood Hills after Vivian's conviction. Local news returned to film our transformation from harassment to harmony, showcasing how a neighborhood can heal when bullies lose their power. During the festival, a desperate homeowner from Nevada called my cell phone. Similar situation. Corrupt HOA president targeting a veteran's family through systematic harassment. Same playbook, different state. The cycle continues, but now there's a roadmap for fighting back. Standing on my porch that evening, watching neighbors share food and stories under string lights Marco helped me install, I reflected on the lessons learned. Home should be sanctuary, not battleground. When neighbors unite, bullies lose their power. Every community can transform from fear to friendship when someone finally says, "Enough." The desert air carried the scent of BBQ smoke mixing with motor oil from the workshop, 2 smells that represent everything good about American neighborhoods. Beth shuffled over with a plate of her famous cookies, grinning like the master strategist she'd proven to be. "Think we'll ever have another Vivian?" she asked. "Not here," I replied, watching kids play in yards where parents used to hide behind curtains. "This neighborhood knows how to fight now." My workshop door stands wide open during the day, welcoming anyone who needs help with a project or just wants to learn something new. The security cameras are still running. Some habits die hard, but they record community coming together instead of crimes being committed. If you've survived an HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else find the courage to fight back against petty tyrants who think authority comes from clipboards and bad attitudes. Subscribe and hit that notification bell for more stories of everyday heroes standing up to neighborhood bullies. Because somewhere right now, another Vivian is terrorizing good people who just want to live in peace. Remember, document everything, find allies, never surrender to bullies, and sometimes the best revenge is simply giving your enemies enough rope to hang themselves. Justice tastes like freedom, sounds like laughter, and smells like honest work in a workshop where everyone's welcome.